And I'll start us off in... Let me look at that up there so I can see it. In 3, 2, 1.
I have
Current Geek!
Aha.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Current Geek. This is the Film Festival edition of the show, a special monthly look at the greatest movies of all time from our geeky perspective. I'm Scott Johnson. He's Tom Merritt. And this week, we're talking about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Tom.
Yeah, based on a book by Ken Kesey that was put out in the 60s.
Yeah.
Written by Lawrence Halban and Bo Goldman, directed by Milos Forman, released November 19th, 1975.
Yeah, it's an oldie but goodie. You and I were like 4 and 5 years old or something. Tiny kids.
Yeah, I definitely have memories of this movie being talked about amongst my family and stuff, you know, but I didn't really know anything about it until I was in college. I think it was when I was in college in the late 80s, early 90s that I actually finally watched it for the first time.
Well, there's plenty of...
But this was your first viewing of it, right?
It was, and there's plenty of sort of uses of its tropes in both other movies that are similar, but also in a lot of parody. I remember a couple of Simpsons episodes that were very reminiscent or very tied to whether or not people had seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And
yeah, Nurse Ratched particularly has become a cultural icon that many people can identify even if they've never heard of or seen the movie or the book.
Yeah, if you're talking about a hospital visit where the nurse was a little rough with you, putting the catheter in, I hear people just go, oh, freaking Nurse Ratched with her catheter skills. Like, it's just a default way of saying the rough and tumble nurse who's a little bit hard-nosed. And
which is funny because Nurse Ratched in the actual movie never puts anyone's catheter in.
No.
Much less, like, she doesn't rough anybody up. You know, she's just a little bit gruff, I guess.
She's just a tough cookie. Like, she's just really strict and adherent to the rules, and but she doesn't go out of, she's not like evil or anything. She doesn't go out of her way to like make people's lives terrible. She's just,
this is going to be a recurring theme for me, but watching this movie this time around versus 20 years ago, a lot of things were different. My perceptions of this movie were quite different based on my experience. One thing that was different was me going, hey, that's Kai Wynn from Deep Space Nine. Because the first time I saw it, Deep Space Nine didn't exist.
Yeah, that's true. I kind of wish I had that experience because when this movie was new, we didn't have Taxi yet. And we would very quickly see Danny DeVito and Christopher Lloyd move into roles on that show and very different kinds of roles. Here,
Christopher Lloyd feels like Christopher Lloyd, right? The Christopher Lloyd from Taxi, the Christopher Lloyd from Back to the Future. I can see him in this character. It's a different character than those, but I can see him. Danny DeVito, though, like, it took some hard staring for knowing it was him. After I saw an IMDb, like, oh yeah, that's Danny DeVito. It took a while for me to see Danny DeVito in there. Yeah,
I remember at the beginning of this movie going, okay, I've read that Danny DeVito's in this, and then I just waited for him. I'm like, where is he? Where is he? Oh, is this? No, he's not in this scene. Okay, is he in this? No, he's not in this scene either. Turns out he was in all the scenes. I just didn't recognize him. And that threw me because now Danny DeVito is one of those guys that no matter how old he gets,
he always looks the same, right?
Yeah, he always looks the same. And like, he's fascinating in this one, like a very
Taxi,
interesting
the TV
character.
show started not too long after this, and he looks like Danny DeVito in Taxi.
Yeah, he
right?
totally does. I think it's because in this his hair's cropped very short.
1978. It's only 3 years later that he's in Taxi, and he just looks like a younger Danny DeVito.
And I want to say in Taxi he had the more like I think he had a mustache for a bit, or maybe a goatee or some kind of beard.
Yeah.
But he definitely had kind of a receding bald thing going and then a big bushy thing on the outsides. And in this, it was cropped short. He kind of smiled the entire time, like a totally different kind of character. But once it hit me, I went, oh my gosh, dude, freaking Danny DeVito rocking the strange inmate trope and doing really well. Like he was one of the highlights of the movie, in my opinion. I thought he was great.
Also texted me the one person that I zeroed in on this time watching that I didn't really come to know until just recently, which is the doctor from Deadwood is Billy.
Yeah, Brad Dourif. He's awesome. He did a few things that people would remember him from the 70s, but more importantly, they probably remember him as as Wormtongue from Lord of the Rings. It's certainly the second movie, Two Towers, and I think there was a bit of his fallout in 3. I can't remember exactly, but anyway, he was always whispering evil stuff to the king. And then you're right, the Doctor in Deadwood, and what an amazing role that was! Like, incredible role. He's back for that in that movie.
A very different role from Grimmel Wormtongue.
Oh my gosh, couldn't have been more different. And I already really find him. It's mostly his eyes. His eyes just are emotive, strange orbs of destiny. It's just the weirdest.
And they
eyes.
were exactly the same eyes in 1975, weren't they?
They were, except the rest of him looks like
Looks like Anthony Michael Hall.
Yeah, this young, skinny guy, but he's got these
it's like
eyes.
Grimmel Wormtongue's eyes in Anthony Michael Hall. And
Yeah.
you get Brad Dourif in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Exactly. And you see some other people that you see in a million other things, and some of these actors' names are going to fly past me, so I'm going to have to look them up to make sure I don't say them wrong. But the big, tall, lanky dude who's was in the Matrix sequels. I'm going to find his name.
Yeah.
Vincent
he
Schiavelli.
pops out as recognizable immediately because he kind of looks the same no matter what era you see him in. Vincent
Schiavelli, I think, yeah.
Schiavelli.
Died a little too soon in 2005. He was only 57, but he is he's a very interesting face, incredible looking actor. That weird bald guy from The Hills Have Eyes and strange horror movies from the 80s is in this, and his name I forgot, but he doesn't have a big role.
Barely has any screen time, but when he does, you're like, whoa.
Yeah, you can't forget that guy. He's just impossible to take out of your mind once you've seen him. But there are a lot of actors like that, and you'll see them and go, oh yeah, I know that guy from this other thing, and it's pretty obvious right up and early when you see Christopher Lloyd, except he looks like 19. And
yeah, right. No, he's just super skinny and young. Yeah,
I mean, like a guy doing like an impression of Doc Brown. Like, it's really weird. But they're all really, really good. I did notice there was an uncredited moment where Angelica Houston was in it. I looked for it because I saw it in the credits, and I thought, where is she? She was just a woman in a crowd, so not a big deal, but I at least thought I'd mention it. She was much younger than.
We should mention that Jack Nicholson is in the movie.
Oh yeah, right. Little role, small side role.
We might want to note that the main character, R.P. McMurphy, is played by a relatively unknown to most of you, Jack Nicholson. You can find him in IMDb listed as front row at Lakers games in the 90s.
There you go. That's the guy. 83 or so now. It was 38 here, so like flip age, which is kind of cool. Yeah, that he was the exact reverse age in numbers that he was today as he is then. And he's amazing in this. Like, okay, here, I'll just get this out early so I don't have to keep bringing it up. I hadn't seen this before. I knew all about it, though. This image of the big Indian dude has been always a visual I've known somehow, but I've never seen the movie.
Oh, yeah, Will Sampson as Chief Bromden.
Yeah, he's awesome. So I had all these ideas of what I thought the movie was, but I never saw it. I also thought, well, 75 is going to age. It's not going to be great. I knew Milos Forman. I like his other movies. Man in the Moon's one of my favorite more modern films he made. He's great. But I didn't expect to love this as much as I did. I really liked this to the point that it didn't feel old to me. It didn't feel... And his movies are like that. They don't feel old. They tend to, I don't know, they feel like they could have been made a week ago. If I didn't, if these actors aren't so recognizable.
There's a style to the film and to the props and stuff that date it.
Yeah.
But the actual action and story don't date it.
Yeah. So this is, I'm going to place this in my higher tier of favorite movies. It's impossible for me to count down my top 10 or 15, but I'm going to put it in there.
We've been doing enough of these that we should start creating a little personal list, I guess.
I'm going to have to. Like, if I'm creating a personal list of just the movies you and I have seen, this is right up there in my top 3 of the ones we've seen, I think.
I was surprised by how much I liked this, too. I remember watching it, again, 20 or so years ago, maybe more. Maybe more like 25. And at the time, I recognized 2 actors, Jack Nicholson and Scatman Crothers. Scatman Crothers because of The Shining, but also he was the voice of Hong Kong Phooey, I think.
Yeah.
And I knew no one else. No one else at the time did I know. I guess I knew Danny DeVito, but I don't think I realized that was Danny DeVito when I watched it first time.
Right.
So an entirely different situation now, knowing Christopher Lloyd very well, knowing Kai Wynn as Nurse Ratched just blew me away because she talks exactly the same.
Yeah, you give her like a ridged nose and some cool earrings, and boom, you're done.
And I was shocked at how much I enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it more having 25 years of living experience under my belt. I appreciated things about it that I didn't appreciate before, and I never felt bored. You'd think with like, oh, it's an indie kind of movie. Milos Forman sort of, makes these not blockbusters, although this actually did very well at the box office. They're more thoughtful pieces, but I think Milos Forman, I think I have underappreciated him myself, because this movie, I never once looked to see how much time was left. I always looked to see, no matter Citizen Kane, I looked, Godfather, I looked, because I'm just like, I'm a busy guy. I'm like, okay, how many? I was too captivated with it.
Yeah, I was too. That's interesting, because I had the same exact experience. I try to watch these the day that we record, because I like them to be fresh. Sometimes it's the night before.
Fresh, yeah.
It depends. But I didn't want this one to stop. And in fact, it went so many places emotionally for me that what I thought I was going to get is more of a comedy. And there's definitely comedy here. There's funny and there's
funny
quirky.
moments. No doubt about it.
All that stuff is true. But I didn't expect the emotional kind of roller coaster, especially the end bits, which sometimes can be handled so ham-fistedly. Just, I guess we're talking about the movie, so there's no problem spoiling some things. But throwing that big appliance freaking sink pipe thing through the window and the chief escaping, is so poetic and such an important reference to earlier in the film, and such a symbolic moment for the movie. And sometimes I'm wary of those sorts of things, because I can see him coming a mile away, and I feel like they're a little too on the nose, or this is a little too nicely wrapped up. But this felt like a little bit like Dead Poet Society. I remember going into that thinking, you're not going to stand on your desks and make me feel anything. Like, good luck. You're overdoing it. This isn't going to work. Then I saw the movie and went, oh my gosh, it totally works. Like, this is another great filmmaker Peter Weir making a great film that makes you feel things just with a combination of build up and satisfying payoff and combinations of music and performance and all these things. It's really kind of a hard thing to make tangible, but whatever it is, I so respect it. And this movie is all about that. Whatever that is, this movie has it in spades. And I got to the end of it, and I was just like, man, what have I been doing all this time having not seen this? Think of all the car accidents I could have gotten in and died, never seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Like, I put myself at risk for all these years and never just took the hour and a half, 2 hours to watch the damn thing. And I finally did. And I really like it. Like, a lot. Like, to the point I'm going to recommend this to people. This should be streaming. It's not. You have to go rent it or buy it. By the way, that sale...
Although we lucked out because it was on sale. I texted Scott. I was like, hey, it's $5 to buy.
Well,
get it.
It was until yesterday, because I went to go pay for it today.
Oh, no. I thought you had bought it on Sunday and then watched it today.
I should have done that. I don't know what I was thinking. I just thought, that'll be there when I get there Tuesday. So it's not that big a deal. But anyway, it was like $4 to rent. So I did. Now I think I should have bought it. I'm going to look for a Blu-ray, because I want to have kind of it's to that degree.
Wow. Yeah.
And I loved it. In fact, I now appreciate other movies that I think are in the same genre more. Like, for example, I'm a big fan of Awakenings with Robin Williams, Robert De Niro, lady that plays Marge on Simpsons, I forgot her name, Julie Kavner. Another great big cast of amazing characters in it's not a quote unquote mental institution this time, but it's a medical ward where people with unexplained neurological conditions are housed, and they may have figured out a way to help some of them get out of their conditions. And it's a drama, but also some funny and quirk. It's not normal Robin Williams comedy, though, at all. It's more of a serious take. And I was watching this going, oh, I should go watch Awakenings, too. It's like my appreciation for this particular subgenre of, I don't know, it's the 50s or 60s, and we have clinical space where we keep society's rejects and we don't understand them really. Like, whatever that is fascinating to me. And this movie's like the grandfather of that stuff, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of great movies like this that treat this topic that came out before, but this is the one, right? Yeah. If you're going to point to one movie about mental health, this is it. And it's interesting to me because when I watched this, whenever it was, 20-something years ago, I very much, in the tradition of Ken Kesey, who wrote Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, was part of the whole Timothy Leary, scene of think for yourself and question authority.
Right.
I interpreted this movie as, yeah, Jack Nicholson's character, R.P. McMurphy, is not perfect, but Nurse Ratched is keeping him down. Right. And he's trying to play by the rules, but the rules are rigged, and she's awful, and he rebels against her, and look what happens, and the system is rigged, and the system is bad, and this is a story that shows that. That's how I interpreted it 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Man, did I interpret it differently this time.
What do you think that is? Why do you suppose that changed for you? I'm very curious about that.
I watched Nurse Ratched and I'm like, no, this is a woman of 1963 with the knowledge available about the psychiatric situation of 1963, trying to do the right thing, but being too wedded to orthodoxy to be able to see when what she thinks is the right thing isn't working and doesn't deviate from it, such that it causes people to behave in ways that are counterproductive to their own health. But she's not evil, and neither is R.P. McMurphy. Mm-hmm. And it was such a different experience. I wanted to hate Nurse Ratched like I did before, especially when she's talking like Kai Wynn from Deep Space Nine, who's a horrible character with no sympathy. But I felt sympathy for Nurse Ratched, especially when they're in the office meeting where she's like, I think we can help him. I interpreted that the first time around as like her conniving to keep him under her thumb and don't let him have freedom. He wasn't getting freedom. He was going to go back to prison. Mm-hmm. And I think that was really a heartfelt, like, no, I'm here to cure people. I want to help them, but they have to, I'm the expert. And it is a very 1960s authoritarian mentality of like, no, science has led us to a point where we know how to fix things. Mm-hmm. And the problem with it wasn't that it was authority. The problem with it was that they didn't understand their own limitations. They didn't know what they didn't know. And so they pushed to do things so much that it caused people to slip out from under that. But it wasn't from bad intentions. Mm. It was from ignorance, I think. Yeah. And I think that's what this movie shows, is that, Nurse Ratched she's just too rigid. And the lesson of Nurse Ratched is you need to be flexible and adapt to situations and open your eyes and look what's around. Don't just follow a plan because you have, dogmatic faith in that plan. Yeah. And Jack Nicholson's character, I mean, he's trying to play by the rules. He doesn't want to get sent back to prison. He wants to stay there. He's not faking it, but he's like, can we just watch a baseball game? And yeah, I want to mess with her a little bit, but not too much. Mm-hmm. And it's a much more deep and volatile situation than I gave it credit for first time around.
I think you just summed it up. I think that's it. And I think I felt the same. I didn't see it the first time, obviously, all that time ago, but I feel like both of you are maybe saying the same thing. We've grown in our lives to see things differently over time. And I mean, when I was growing up, there were often templates laid before me, and I was told I was to adhere to one or more of these templates. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that the opposite is true, that there are none. And so this movie resonated in some ways, like, hey, we're going to sort of pull a fast one and escape from the place for just an afternoon, get on a fishing boat and have some fun.
We just want to have some fun.
And they did. And it was
therapeutic.
It was absolutely therapeutic.
Better.
Exactly.
That's like a recurring theme in there. Like, people start doing better under R.P. McMurphy's tutelage. Yeah. And of course the big example of that is Billy Stutter goes away after he's spent a night with Candy, I think her name is. Yeah. No. And then when Nurse Ratched lays into him because he didn't follow her plan, and he's not following the morals of the day, his stutter come back, and that's very much of my first interpretation of, see, she's bad, she's trying to make him conform, but it isn't just that. I mean, that is an element of her personality, and that is her flaw, and you see that on display in that situation. But there are also times when she's actually helping, where you see that her group therapy thing has the beginnings of what group therapy would become in the future, and is actually in some ways better for some of the patients. Like, what's William Redfield's character?
I forgot his name.
Harding actually, I think, is benefiting from this.
He's really good in this.
Possibly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And it's got this, just this fluidity of, I mean, it's clearly an allegory for free thinking. It's like it's supposed to say
that's what Ken Kesey was about.
Yeah,
right?
Sure, and I think it comes through, and it resonated with me. But also, there was a point at the end of this that really stuck with me, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit, and I'll just focus on it for a second. But after all this stuff goes down, and there's the near strangling of Nurse Ratched, who, by the way, I always thought was Ratchet, but I've learned in this movie it's Ratched. Yeah. I think a lot of people think it's Ratchet. But anyway, there's, Jack Nicholson is choking her, nearly strangling her, and she kind of gets barely away with that. And then later, the guys are all playing cards again. We don't really know where Jack Nicholson is. There's the rumor that he escaped and all that. And then she comes to the mic and asks one of the older guys how his treatment was. And he said he was feeling much better, and she said good. And there was something, and I'm going to attribute this to Louise Fletcher, I think. But her performance then was clearly a much more, she just had a humbleness to her, like someone who's just been through something very traumatic. She's got this neck brace on her. Her eyes are a little red, all the signs of trauma. And there's a kindness to her voice that she hadn't had up till then. It was much more clinical up till then. And then suddenly she's got a little bit of kindness seeps back in. It's like she learned something too. Not that she had to be assaulted to learn it, because we're supposed to feel conflicted about that. She shouldn't have had to. No, she shouldn't have had to. And also, it's terrible that he did, but also circumstances are complicated. But also, he was kind of a creep before he got in there. But then he's kind of a leader. Like that's why the
we knew he was violent with a short temper,
right?
So you kind of knew that if he was bottled up too long, that's what would happen. And it, it is a complex situation at the end when Billy kills himself. That's enough. I mean, he just watched how Billy had been better. He had been improved moments before, and Nurse Ratched's rigidity drove him not only back to being ill, but to the point of suicide and beyond. And in R.P. McMurphy's mind, that was unforgivable. You killed Billy, and I'm going to kill you.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's justifiable, but it's logical from a certain point of view.
Especially in their closed system like that, like this.
And honestly, everything up to that point, I follow. Where Ken Kesey's story loses me, and it may be just ignorance or naivete, is would they then take a person that they thought was faking it, didn't really think was ill, weren't sure if he belonged in the mental institution or back in prison, and lobotomize them? That seemed extreme.
Yeah, it did to me
like
too.
A jump. And that's the story, not the movie.
Yeah.
That's causing that. Maybe that was it. Maybe it's like, hey man, attempted murder on a nurse, you're getting lobotomized. And the movie's trying to show it as, see, this is what the system does. The system will come down hard on free thinkers. That will come down, it will overreact. When someone justifiably was angry and loses control, they'll come for you and lobotomize you. We didn't have any indication of lobotomy. There's the electroshock therapy early on, but McMurphy, comes out of that just fine.
Yeah. I mean, it even reminded me, there's some parental stuff here, because let's say you have a kid who yells in public, screams that he doesn't want to, wants to have something at the store, and if you don't let him have it, he's going to scream and have a meltdown. I had a kid who did that when I was raising her, and she used to lose her mind. Well, it narrows it down to 2 because I have 2 daughters. Anyway.
Well, 2-year-old children, you roll the dice, and most of them are going to do that.
You're right. You're right. And she kind of just had this tendency toward it, and it even extended into, I'd say she was 5 or 6, and she was still kind of hard-headed about it. And I remember at the time thinking, what's actually bothering me here? Is it the disruption of norms in public, or is it that she's angry? Like, where am I getting the aggravation from? Am I feeling it because of pressure from the outside, or am I feeling it because of pressure from her? And I really
I'm sure the answer is both.
The answer is both, but it was more worried about what other people thought than I was worried about her, and it kind of was a bit of a life-altering thought back then. And this is sort of, in my opinion, this is sort of like a reminder of that. It's like society is so afraid of breaking the molds. There's always give room. There's always a little bit of wiggle. You can move in and out of the boundaries a little bit here and there, and that shifts over time and everything. But in 1963, if you're talking to yourself, or in the case of Billy, terrible stutter and obviously some problems at home. He's got mom issues. Like that stuff is contributing to what today is probably much easier thing to treat with training, medication.
And as much as I have expressed some sympathy for Nurse Ratched, damn her for not recognizing that his problem was with his overbearing mother, and she triggered that by being an overbearing mother archetype then. Like, come on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I couldn't, this is a side thing, but I couldn't help every time he was hanging around with, you said his name and I forgot his name. The janitor guy. What's his name? He was also in The Shining. Scatman Crothers.
Scatman Crothers was the act Turkle.
Yes, Turkle. Whenever Jack Nicholson was hanging around Scatman Crothers, or every time I see him in a photo from this film, all I can think about is, y'all are about to have a real bad time in The Shining, because you're gonna take an axe right to his gut, right in the middle of that movie, and that'll be the end of it.
Scatman Crothers should have known that Jack Nicholson does not bring about a good end for him, no matter what. I mean, it's actually slightly better. He doesn't get an axe in the gut, cuckoo's nest at least.
No, it ended a little bit better for him, but yeah, like I guess of all the movies we've done, I actually think this one may have been the most emotionally resonant for me. Close to that would probably be. Probably be Schindler's List, but from a different kind of empathy, like a different kind of, it's kind of a far away time, a thing that happened that was horrific, and I can appreciate it for what it is, and I understand the history, and so I'm feeling what that is. But something about this just felt prime and in charge and in front of me and ever present.
Isn't that weird though? Because this is loosely based on real stories, but it's not as broad, and it's not as grounded in reality as Schindler's List. Right. No, I agree. Like there is no actual Nurse Ratched out there. I don't think there's any actual R.P. McMurphy. They're based on real people, but these aren't the real people. Or Schindler's List, like, no, those were actually real Nazis who actually did that.
I wouldn't mind.
Schindler was a real person.
I wouldn't mind better understanding lobotomy as a procedure and when and why it was used and what the justifications were. Like, did they do this to violent patients who? That I know that they did as a last resort. Maybe not as much of a last resort as it should have been. I don't think lobotomy is used anymore unless there's some kind of clinical situation where it won't actually. I shouldn't say. I don't really know, but I don't think it's practiced much. You don't hear about it now anymore, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember hearing about it to me, it sounds like an ancient thing, because the only time I ever hear about it is movies like this, or some story of something old, or some cartoon will reference it, or someone will say, I should have got a lobotomy instead of whatever. And I've never heard any modern context for any doctors or any surgeons today who are like, well, I got my 3 o'clock lobotomy. Right after that, I did an appendix. Yeah. Like, I don't think
this was originated by a Portuguese neurologist that discovered the therapeutic value of leucotomy in certain psychoses.
Yeah.
Increased in use in the United States in the 50s, was majority performed on women. 60% of lobotomy patients were women. From the 1950s on, lobotomy began to be abandoned, first in the Soviet Union and Europe, and it is no longer considered to be
effective anything.
Useful practice.
And in some ways, maybe this movie feels prescient because we're still so. No, I won't say bad. We're still such early stages on dealing with mental illness in a lot of ways. But in a lot of ways, we have made huge strides past what this place was. Like, gigantic strides. We understand stuff way better. There was some patient there. I mean, I'm analyzing actors and their performances, but there was, the one main guy, I forgot his name, always wear a fancy shirt and always seemed to be agreeable with everybody around him. But that guy was showing basically the signs and symptoms of extreme anxiety and bipolar disorder. And these days, scientifically, we have ways of treating that is far beyond anything that they would have had in '63. So in a lot of ways, we have just
Depakote. You don't need to stick something in someone's brain. Electroshock therapy is still used in limited cases where it can be effective, but it's also not as traumatic.
No, that looked nightmarish.
As a lobotomy. Lobotomy is no longer practiced, and in fact, people have called for the rescindance of Moniz's Nobel Prize for developing it because it is banned in most countries now.
I mean, is it considered inhumane? It probably is, or they wouldn't ban it. Okay,
it is now. That's what I wasn't sure about. I didn't know if there were still some situations where it might prove useful for one reason or another, but apparently not. It is not.
If I'm 80, I'm going to tell people right now, write this down. When I'm 80 and if I start seeing green monkeys fly out of trees, just snip mine. Just go, and I'll be happy to be a little vegetable for the rest of it. That's fine.
No, don't say that. You wouldn't. You really wouldn't. Because you wouldn't be happy. You wouldn't be you anymore. I think that's why it was banned. Is you don't cure someone by getting rid of them, but leaving them alive. That's horrible.
That's a good point. I'm just trying to think from the perspective of the person. If it's really bad, but
I think the key is, and again, I'm talking out of my depth here, but my guess is the key is there are better ways to help you deal with it than to leave you trapped in your own brain. I mean, then another thing we don't know is, a lobotomy may leave you sort of placid on the outside, but you may be worse on the inside. You may be screaming on the inside, but unable to express it.
Yeah, I don't like that. That sounds awful.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I take it back. I don't want to do that. So if all they're doing is shutting off my mechanisms for the output, but the output's still building up and ready to roll, forget it. I don't want that then. Here's what I'd rather have. Give me a full frontal... Give me a new brain.
Yes.
I want a new brain. Just give me a new brain. Full frontal nudity? I wasn't going there, chat room.
The full Monty?
Give me the full Monty.
By the way, there's also something called lobectomy, where they do a more precise surgery, excising maybe a particular lobe of the brain that is still used because it's more precise. And it doesn't leave the patient.
Does that is that a thing now? Like people are doing that now?
I don't know about that. I don't know.
Interesting. I don't know why I find that stuff so fascinating, but
yeah, no, and I'm sure I'm probably blurring some lines and getting some things wrong here. Lobectomy seems to be used in lungs more often than the brain. But,
you and I are driving outside of our lane here. We don't know.
Yeah.
But my sister is familiar with a bunch of this stuff. I may ask her. I don't know if she's ever seen this movie. The other thing that struck me about it was, I think the language of it, which gets a little saucy, felt like a thing that you'd see today on HBO or something. Like a very modern, with the exception of a couple of terms that were very 1960s, 70s that I'm not going to repeat here. For the most part, in its crassest moments, it could have been filmed today. Like I can't get away from how much,
except for the use of terms where you're like, nobody says that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. The slang has left, but in a couple, and it's only really a couple of cases. But Milos Forman just had this way of making something feel timeless, and he did it here. I always thought it was set in the 70s. Now that I've seen it, this would have been them setting a thing 13 years previous.
Right.
Which
it's a period piece.
Yeah, it basically is. I mean, it's a short period. It's
Although it's weird to think that would mean if it was made today, it would be set in 2006.
Yeah, well, that's true. But seeing what he did with Man on the Moon, which apparently just completely changed Jim Carrey forever, if you believe that documentary about him, it was another period piece. It was him, showing. Oh, and another Taxi connection, by the way.
Yeah, right.
And Danny DeVito. I didn't even think about this. Danny DeVito and Christopher Lloyd are in that Milos Forman movie as themselves on the Taxi set.
Oh yeah,
heavily made up to look younger, but those guys are all back together again with the director that directed them One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I didn't even think about it. Just now. It just hit me that's the case. But anyway, what was my point? Oh. He was really good at making that seem like it was truly in the era that it was set. And I just admire that with directors because it can be hard. Hairstyles sometimes slip through, even though you don't think you've got one that's going to feel like the 70s. It comes through and looks like it. I always admire that. And I know that's not just him. That's a crew, and that's people working behind the scenes and in other categories that are apparently going to be skipped at the Oscars this year, but we won't get into that controversy just yet. Did you hear about that? I assume you heard about it.
What? No, what?
Oh, they're going to do commercial cuts. So during commercials for a chunk of the Oscars, they're going to do cinematography award. If that sounds crazy, it's because it is.
Right. I thought they did that last year. No?
They're claiming this year's the first year they would do it. And it's that.
I must have heard about it last year and forgot that it was new because that sounds familiar.
It was like that, hairstyle stuff, maybe costume. I can't remember. But it's kind of some big categories that a lot of people are mad about. I mean, whatever. Either way, they earn the award.
Well, I mean, I took a breath outside, and a lot of people are mad about it. So hard to say.
Was that you? Gosh dang it, Tom.
Yeah,
I was so pissed when I heard that you took a breath.
I've already apologized on Facebook, so.
Okay, good.
I don't mean to say it's a good idea. I'm just saying people being mad about something anymore doesn't mean anything. Right?
Well, that's a good point. No, you're right. Well, the people that are mad are the ones I'm like Del Toro's last year's winner of Best Picture and Best Director is mad.
Okay, that carries some weight.
Yeah, it feels like there's some, at least you want to read what he has to say about it and go, oh, yeah, I think he's kind of right. Because he likes to give credit to his crew and his other people, and it's, and there's something kind of nice about that. But you're right.
Open Bayou points out the Grammys did that. They gave a lot of the major awards out earlier in the day, and then just announced them during the broadcast.
And in the Oscars, it's usually like the scientific stuff, right? Like they'll do like
the scientific stuff, the technical achievement awards are done on an entirely different day.
Yeah, but it just feels like
they do a spot where they show like, hey, last week, Mia Sorvino gave out, or whoever. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, it's actually kind of perfect though.
That's not her.
I'm not saying her star has burned out as much as you maybe are implying, but still.
Well, they usually get someone who's kind of relevant to give them out so that they don't feel so bad.
Yeah, it was Patrick Stewart once. So that was cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Bringing us back to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest real quick.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons this holds up so well and feels so good, and this is all credit to Milos and his team, they shot the film in the Oregon State Hospital. The book from Ken Kesey, if it wasn't based on, could have been, right? Like this is the actual kind of hospital being described in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. They had the cooperation of the director of the hospital, Dean Brooks, so much so that the director of the Oregon State Hospital in which they shot plays Dr. John Spivey in the movie. The doctor that McMurphy sits down with and talks at the beginning of the movie and several times after that, that's actually Dean Brooks, the director of the Oregon State Hospital.
He's good in this.
An actor.
He's good in this. Like,
well, because they said, be yourself, be the director of a mental hospital. And he probably like, yep, I'll do that.
Yeah, because there's a scene early during his induction into the place. Oh, that's fascinating now that I think of it with those eyes. I didn't know that. I just thought he was just really good. And there's a scene where
I didn't realize it when I was watching it. I found this when I was reading up on it afterwards.
Because Jack Nicholson pounds his fist on his desk at one point, and the doctor, the way he reacts it is so natural and so scripted in my head. I'm impressed with that guy now suddenly. And when he was coming in to check on Billy, he seemed as legit as anybody in that cast. That's impressive. I'm impressed with that. Whatever happened to that? I guess he stayed at the hospital and continued to direct it, I'm sure.
I mean, except for that Billy scene, he's basically sitting behind a desk, so he doesn't have a lot of blocking, a lot of moves. That's where stuff can get real complicated. But all credit to him, like he didn't get read voice like. And so, Mr. McMurphy, I'm trying to remember. Like he sounds very natural, but. If you can get past that, I don't know how much coaching he took to get there. Then it's just act the way you would normally act with a patient.
Yeah.
And that's it. They also spent 3 months shooting there, including observations. They would sit in on some of the group therapy. They would shadow some of the people who were like the characters that they had to play. And all of that work, being in an actual hospital, having the actual director in the cast, shadowing people who are similar so that you can see what it's really like. I mean, it pays off. That's why this feels so real even today.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I felt that, and also the location did wonders. And I don't like hospitals at all. I don't like any of them. But I have to say, in the modern era, we've gotten a little better, probably because of exorbitant fees that they can decorate things better. But, like where my daughter had her baby recently, it was this beautiful room with like really nice decorative stuff and a big window and all that. But in my head, hospital rooms look like the places in this movie. And that really lends credibility to the time and the place. And kind of that looks like the hospital rooms I remember as a kid. Ugh, sure. I hate them. They just smell bad, and they just are so sterile and weird and creepy. And by the time they had their party in there and the place was all thrashed, it could just roll it right into like a Resident Evil game or movie. Like, just scary, gross hospitals, man. Not interested. Don't want to go to one. The idea of walking around with a walker out of my mind because I'm full of meds, just kind of with my head down, is just one of the creepiest ideas.
With a little flimsy gown on all the time.
I don't ever want to end up there. It makes me feel
Clothes make the man.
Do they?
You feel different when you're dressed different. It's total side point, but you know, if I'm ever in a hospital situation, I want to wear normal clothes so I can feel closer to normal.
You look very gangster tonight with your cool hat on, though. I like it.
I forgot I had this on.
It's all right. I've been wearing this all day, so we both look a little...
Yeah, I put this on at the end of DTNS as kind of a bit, and then I never took it off because it's nice and warm and comfy.
It's an awesome hat. I think it makes you look kind of cool, but anyway. So there was some talk that the author was pissed. It says he was bitter.
Yeah, no,
what
exactly.
Was the deal?
Ken Kesey was brought in after the original script was drafted because they thought maybe he could improve it. They didn't like what he did, and then they had a falling out over royalties. And for the rest of his life, Kesey said he never saw the film, and he thought they were all awful.
So who knows if this is true? IMDb has this silly little story about it. It says, author Ken Kesey, so bitter about the way the filmmakers were butchering, in his words, his story, that he vowed to never watch the completed film and even sued the movie producers because it was shown from Chief Broman's perspective as the novelist, or it wasn't. So it was originally, I guess the book is from Chief's perspective, not Jack Nicholson's character, which is kind of interesting.
And honestly, I think Kesey probably has some points. Right. There is a perspective to having Chief be the narrative POV that is undermined by making McMurphy the POV, especially because, you know, put the white guy in there. So you have a more privileged POV. That said, I still think the movie stands up as a legitimate story, even if it's not the same and maybe not as good of a story as the book.
Well, it says here that he claims years later that he was lying in a bed in a hotel room, flipping through television channels. He settles into some late night movie that looked kind of interesting, only to realize after a few minutes in that it was his film, and then he changed channels. That's what he claims. He's like Alan Moore. These guys, these like creative writer genius guys, they always hate the stuff that gets made from their thing. I wonder, like, I don't think Stephen King has this problem. He seems to be pretty chill with
and he's usually involved, right?
But sometimes it's terrible, like so bad.
Yeah,
he should be mad about how bad. I'm trying to think of a bad one. There's so many. Anything in the 80s, really, that were just poor, adaptations of his books. And then nowadays, we're kind of have a resurgence of quality adaptations of King's work. But I've never understood it if you get mad. Like, if you sell the rights, you made your money.
I think if you're involved and it's bad, then you've seen it. And you're not going to go out there, I won't watch it. You just kind of let's all try to forget about it, right? I'm not going to talk it down because I was involved in it. But, I'm also not going to talk it up.
Oh, King.
Whereas if you're Kesey and they're and they sort of, you couldn't work out to be influenced on it, then you're I think you're in your rights to say hey, that's not how I would have wanted it done. So I don't think it's good. I mean, think how angry people get when they watch a movie based on their favorite book and it doesn't do it the way they thought it should be done. Imagine if you wrote that book.
Yeah, good point. Like you've written a couple little novels. Do you ever feel like if somebody said, "Hey, Tom, I'm going to buy the rights to these," and you're like, "Sweet, going to cash this lucrative check," and then later you find out that your movie was turned into, I don't know, some porn hookers in space or something, would you go, I demand justice. This is terrible.
I mean, I think porn hookers in space is just so entertaining of a title that it ruins the analogy.
I know, it kind of makes me want to go write a book.
But let's say they turned it into Jupiter Ascending, right?
Yeah.
There.
Oh,
now I'm angry.
There's a good example, right? Because can you even associate Jupiter Ascending with its source material in your head? I can't. All I think about is the terrible movie adaptation. So
here's the thing.
Book,
I think we live in a different time than Ken Kesey did. In fact, I know we do. It's the 2019, not 1960s or early 70s. I understand that if Akiva Goldsman wants to make Pilot X into a movie, and please reconsider, Akiva, I think it would be great. It won't cost near as much as you think. But let's say that happened. I understand that they are the movie people, and they're going to make their movie.
Yeah.
And it's a separate work. It's a different work, and it's going to have to be told differently. And you've got different creative people on it who are going to put their vision on it. I would understand that. I also am glad to see that things like Game of Thrones and The Expanse are including the authors in the production, so that they can better tap into, like, okay, let's find out what made your book great and try to translate that into our creative vision so we can make this just as great.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the results are better. Maybe that's more of a, maybe that works in TV better because you've got this longer run. You've got to consider, I don't know, holding the audience longer than just 2 hours. So maybe there's a difference there. But I think that's, if you can do that, great. If you're adapting an Alan Moore work, tough poop, because he preemptively hates anything you make. So it's not going to happen. But occasionally you can pump out V for Vendetta, add your own twist on it, and have it be a good movie and still a good comic book, whether he's pissed or not. And I would argue, I think Watchmen holds up pretty well, even though some people don't like it. But I think it's really good. More
people would disagree on Watchmen than V for Vendetta.
They would. It's a controversial topic, I know. Yeah. Having just rewatched it for Film Sack, I really like that movie. I think it's good. But whatever.
But it's different.
It's
right?
different.
And I think that's the point is you have to realize that, I mean, movies are basically fan fiction of books. When they turn a book into a movie, it's somebody who's excited about that story, wanting to tell it their own way.
Yeah. I don't hear a lot of people complaining the other direction when someone does a novelization of a film, like a Star Wars film or something. I don't hear as many
usually
people
just think it's bad.
Yeah,
novelizations are awful.
Yeah, either they just think it's bad and won't even look at it, so they don't really actually know if it's bad, or if they read it, it fleshes things out in such a way that if you do like it, you're not going to be unhappy that they gave you more.
Yeah, they've gotten better, right?
Yeah.
And I think they're taken more seriously rather than just being handed off and like, here, Alan Dean Foster, do whatever. We don't care. It's now become a thing like, oh no, here's what we want the novelization to achieve.
All right. Well, Tom will be working this NaNoWriMo coming up November 2019, all on space hookers, porn hookers in space. Very much looking forward to it. Tom, let us know how it goes.
Well, now I have to give you credit too. Crap. All right.
Oh, shoot. All right, my favorite trivia, I just wanted to make sure you got this in here. When filming the fishing scene, all of the cast, except for Jack Nicholson, got seasick, and violently so. Like, all of them were super sick. What made it worse for them is it took a whole week to shoot. Danny DeVito still gets queasy when he gets asked about it. So apparently, rough time for everybody except Jack, who probably just grinned and went, the Lakers are going to take it again this year. That's the worst Jack Nicholson I've ever done. Hope you enjoy.
Yeah, I wonder if in 1974 and 75 he thought about the Lakers. I don't know. I don't know when that Laker love was born.
So who are our award winners here? We haven't talked about, or did we? Did we talk about?
Oh, no, that is important because this is one of the few movies to win all 5 major Academy Awards. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest won Best Picture. Nicholson won Best Actor in a Lead Role. Nurse Ratched, a.k.a. Kai Wynn, a.k.a. Louise Fletcher, won Best Actress in a Lead Role. Yeah. Milos Forman won Best Director. And Hobbit and Goldman won Best Screenplay.
Nice.
Boom, boom, boom. It happened one night in 1934, was the only one to do it before One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Silence of the Lambs is the only one to do it since in 1991.
Oh, we haven't had anything since then? That's crazy. I was sure you're going to say, oh, yeah, in 2005 we had something, but no? Wow.
No.
That surprises me. I don't know why it does. It probably shouldn't, but it always seems like there's some movie that does that every once in a while, but I didn't realize how rare that was. That's crazy. Anyway, I think it's a significant film. So does the Library of Congress. In 1993, they officially added it to its selection of preservation in the National Film Registry. So don't just take our word for it. Take the U.S. government's word for it.
In fact, it happened one night. We'll be watching in 2 months.
Oh, no way. So I don't even know what that is. I have no idea what that is.
Pretty soon. 1934.
I'm excited. Oh, man. It's an oldie. All right. Yeah. That's awesome.
And Silence of the Lambs we'll probably get to next year, but it's on the list too.
Boy, talk about a movie that was just on the cusp of change. This movie at the time was the 7th biggest grossing film of all time. So after its run, 7th most highest grossing film of all time. That was about to change. Like a complete sea change in what a blockbuster meant only a couple of years later. And
that movie we watched in December kind of helped change that.
Yeah, it had a real impact, it turns out. But
the Star Wars.
Yeah. Now, also according to this, is this true? Kirk Douglas possessed the movie rights because he fell in love with the book. And then his son, Michael Douglas, we all know Michael Douglas, finally started the project. I didn't know that. He was a co-producer. That's crazy.
Yeah. Saul Zaentz and Michael Douglas produced the film.
That's great. All right. It's a nice little side note there. Well, that's your movie. I hope you guys watch it. I think it's worth the rental or the purchase. It's a nifty, cool movie that is way better than I thought, and stuck with me, still sticking with me. It's the kind of thing I could watch again and admire again. And I would put it, if you're looking for category here, that is the category I mentioned before is where I'd put it. Peter Weir makes movies like this, so I'd say Dead Poet Society is a very similar themed movie. Awakenings is a lot like this. There's just I don't know. There's a kind of movie he made here that I like, and I didn't.
One thing I forgot to mention when you were talking just now about how this is kind of on the cusp of change.
Yeah.
Tonally, this movie feels a lot like MASH the movie to me.
Yeah.
It's got that sort of like, well, we're just gonna do the thing, right? Yeah, we'll do the thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And kind of like pace and sound quality and look, kind of faux documentary kind of look to it. But I think MASH the movie is not quite as good.
No, I don't either. I don't think it's as good. And I think it's a great movie.
Even though I love MASH the movie. I am a big fan and I've seen it a million times for various reasons. Just as a film, it's not as tight.
Well, it is interesting because this is a lot like those movies by, I forgot the director who did MASH. Anyway, that guy. He was always known for ensembles, like big ensembles. Huge groups of people making a movie and make it all make sense. This is a lot like that. Like, this is a big cast, very interesting bunch of mix of character actors and other actors who would go on to be, more leading people or whatever. And it just works in such a beautiful way. And you care about all these guys, especially by the end.
You'd be speaking about Robert Altman.
Robert Altman. Gosh dang it. What's wrong with me? But it feels like every Robert Altman movie, except for Popeye, maybe, which I like, by the way. I like Popeye.
It's kind of an ensemble of its own, I suppose.
I like Popeye a lot. But that's because I was a kid. And
I like Popeye because it was one of the movies on HBO when we first got cable, and so we watched it over.
Yeah, we had a tape.
Popeye and the Jazz Singer.
I wore it out. We sang the music all the time. Like, I couldn't get enough of it. But I realized that in some quarters, that's not a good movie. That's fine. But Altman had this way of taking a big group and making it work. I think that's what Foreman did here. And I'm just going to say it now. I think it's in my top 2 movies we've seen in this series.
What's the other one?
I think Schindler's List, and they're kind of occupying the same seating arrangement. What's different is I saw Schindler's List in the theater multiple times since, and then again with you. This thing I'd never seen before, and it's just right up there. It's really, really good. Next month, E.T., the Extraterrestrial.
Not just a terrestrial, but extra.
Bonus Earther, I like to call it.
Bonus Earth. That's translated to Bonus Earth.
Yeah. Next month, B.E., the Bonus Earther.
Send a call to his domicile.
I love it. I love just replacing words with other words. But anyway, 1982's huge monster hit from Steven Spielberg, who we were just talking about, so we'll get to talk about him again. And we'll see how that movie's doing all this time later. That's E.T., the Extraterrestrial. And do not forget, at the end of this episode, keep listening, because Legal Geek is here to talk about trademark oppositions over official pizza of football in honor of the Super Bowl that just happened. So check it out. It's got some bonus stuff in there as well. And then next week, back to the norm. Not the norm, but just a conversation show. We'll have some news. We'll have some thoughts. We'll have some nerdy stuff to talk about. Topics of the day. So come around for that.
It's like our own Carol Burnett variety show.
Yes. I'll be Tim Conway. You can be
Carol Burnett.
Or who played Mama in Mama's Family? You can be her. Forgot her name. Sure. She's great. Anyway, so that's going to do it. Before we go, though, Tom Merritt, anything going on? You want to tell people about it?
Yeah. We are back to the royal we. I am back to podcasting with Molly Wood. Woo. And I'm very excited about it. We talked a lot about keto diets and intermittent fasting and silver Jeeps on the last episode of It's a Thing. If you like hearing Molly and I speculate about the world and the trends we're in, go check it out at it'sathing.me.
Very nice. I would also point your attention to the weekly podcast/videocast live stream that I do about Dungeons and Dragons. Not about it. We're actually playing the game. It's called There Will Be Dungeons at therewillbedungeons.com. You can subscribe to that today as well. Perfect listening companion. Once you've had all this enlightening information from Tom and Molly, move right on over into the world of fantasy with myself, Bo, John, Kyle, and Kristen as we take on the world of that Bo built. He's an amazing DM, and you have to hear it just to believe it. So it's fantastic stuff.
Bo
Check
knows
it out.
DMs.
He does. He knows his DMs, and we know nothing. It's over at therewillbedungeons.com. Do check it out. CurrentGeek.com is our website. Please go there if you're looking for show notes, old episodes, all that stuff. And as always, you can email us, currentgeek@gmail.com. That's going to do it for us. For me, for Tom. We'll see you next time.
Hooray!
Vicki Lawrence. That's her.